Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. The parking lot was empty when Wes Tyler pulled in at 2:15. The quarterly reports had taken half the time he'd expected, which meant he could actually make it to Jake's baseball practice for once. He grabbed his laptop bag and headed for the elevator, already picturing his 8-year-old son's face when he showed up in the bleachers. The apartment was silent when he opened the door. Too silent. No TV playing cartoons. No sound of Jake's endless questions echoing from his room. No smell of whatever Lindsay had decided to order for dinner. The note sat on the kitchen table, held down by Lindsay's coffee mug. Her handwriting, the loops tight and controlled. "We took your son to my parents' house. Don't bother coming." Wes read it 3 times, feeling something cold settle in his chest. "We, not I." And that last line, "don't bother coming," had the distinct ring of her father's voice behind it. He pulled out his phone and called Lindsay. Voicemail. He tried again. Same result. He called the Marsh house. Glenn answered on the 4th ring. "Wes." The single word carried enough dismissal to fill a conversation. "Where's Jake?" "He's fine. He's where he needs to be. Put him on the phone." "I don't think that's a good idea right now." Lindsay's made her decision, and frankly, we support it. You need to respect that. Wes's grip tightened on the phone. "Glenn, I'm asking nicely. Let me talk to my son. You're not listening. This isn't your call anymore. Lindsay's finally seeing things clearly, and we're not going to let you manipulate her again." The line went dead. Wes stood in the kitchen, the note still in his other hand, and felt something shift inside him. For 6 months, he noticed the changes. Lindsay pulling away, spending more time at her parents' house, taking Jake with her 4 visits that stretched longer each time. Her father's sudden interest in their finances, her mother's pointed comments about Wes's priorities, her brother Mark showing up unannounced, asking intrusive questions about their marriage. He chalked it up to stress. Lindsay's mother had been sick last year, though Sylvia Marsh looked healthy enough now. He tried to be understanding, tried to give Lindsay space, tried to be the supportive husband even as she grew more distant. But this, taking Jake without warning, that note, Glenn's tone, this was something else. Wes grabbed his keys and headed for the door. The Marsh house sat on 2 acres in the suburbs, a sprawling colonial that Glenn had bought during the tech boom. Wes had never liked the place. Too big, too cold, too much like a museum designed to showcase Glenn's success. The circular driveway could hold 8 cars. Today it held 5. Lindsay's SUV, Glenn's Mercedes, Sylvia's Lexus, Mark's pickup truck, and a black sedan Wes didn't recognize. He parked on the street and walked up the driveway. The curtains were drawn on most of the windows, but he could see movement inside through the gaps. He rang the doorbell. Waited. Rang again. The door opened. Glenn Marsh stood there in his golf shirt and pressed khakis, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression somewhere between smug and pitying. "I told you not to come," Glenn said. "I want to see my son. And I told you that's not happening. You're not on a list, Wes." "What list?" Glenn's smile widened slightly. "The list of people who are allowed in this house today. I'm afraid you didn't make the cut." Behind Glenn, Wes could see into the foyer. Sylvia Marsh stood near the staircase, her arms crossed, watching with an expression of cold satisfaction. Mark leaned against the doorway to the living room, bigger than Wes remembered, his jaw set. "Glenn, I don't know what Lindsay told you, but she told us plenty, and we've seen it ourselves. You're not well, Wes. You're not stable. Lindsay's been protecting Jake from it for months, and we're done watching her suffer. That's bullshit, and you know it. Is it the angry outbursts? The paranoia? The way you've been isolating her from her family?" Wes felt his jaw clench. "I haven't isolated anyone. She's the one who—" Movement in the upstairs window caught his eye. A small face pressed against the glass. Jake. His son's hands came up, holding something white against the window. A piece of paper, words written in his child's scrawl, large enough to read from the driveway. "They're lying, help Dad." Everything else fell away. The sound of Glenn's voice, the weight of the watching eyes, the careful control Wes had been maintaining. He looked at his son's frightened face, saw the desperation in those wide eyes, and something inside him snapped into focus with perfect clarity. He looked back at Glenn. "Get out of my way. You need to leave, Wes, before we call the police." Wes took a step back, measured the distance, and kicked the door with everything he had. The wood around the lock splintered. Glenn stumbled backward with a shout. Wes pushed through, and Mark was already moving toward him, but Wes was faster. He'd spent 3 years in construction before going back to school for civil engineering, and he'd learned how to handle men who thought size was all that mattered. Mark swung hard. Wes ducked under it, drove his shoulder into Mark's midsection, and used the bigger man's momentum to slam him into the wall. Mark's head hit the plaster with a crack, and he slid down dazed. Sylvia was screaming something. Glenn was scrambling for his phone. Wes was already taking the stairs 3 at a time. Jake's room was at the end of the hall. The door was locked from the outside, a padlock that hadn't been there on any of Wes's previous visits. He could hear Jake crying inside. "Stand back, buddy," Wes shouted. He kicked again, and the door frame gave way. Jake rushed into his arms, sobbing, and Wes held him tight, feeling his son's small body shake against him. "It's okay," Wes murmured. "I've got you. I'm not leaving you." "Dad, they said you didn't want me anymore. They said you were sick and I couldn't see you. But I heard them talking. Grandpa and Uncle Mark. They're trying to." "Wes Tyler." Glenn's voice came from the stairs, sharp with authority. "You've just committed breaking and entering. Assault. The police are on their way." Wes turned, keeping Jake behind him. Glenn stood at the top of the stairs, phone in hand, Mark visible behind him with blood trickling from his temple. Lindsay appeared from one of the other rooms, her face pale, her expression unreadable. "Lindsay," Wes said quietly, "what the hell is this?" She wouldn't meet his eyes. "You weren't supposed to come. Our son is locked in a room, with a padlock." He was upset. He needed time to calm down. "He's 8 years old, and you locked him in a room like an animal. We were protecting him from—" She stopped, glanced at her father. "From what?" Wes pressed. "From me? His father? The man who's never missed a parent-teacher conference, who coaches his baseball team, who's been there for every single moment of his life." "You've been erratic," Glenn cut in. "Aggressive. Lindsay's been documenting it for months. Your outbursts at family dinners. Your suspicious behavior. Your attempts to control her. We have records, Wes. Dates, times, witnesses." Wes felt something click into place. The sudden family dinners where he'd been subtly provoked. The questions about their finances that he'd answered honestly, not realizing they were being recorded. Lindsay's new habit of keeping detailed notes, her phone always nearby during their arguments. "You've been building a case," he said slowly. Glenn's smile returned. "We've been protecting our family. Lindsay deserves better than a husband who's clearly suffering from some kind of breakdown. And Jake deserves a stable home environment, which you're providing by locking him in a room. Temporary measures for a difficult situation. Once the custody hearing. Custody hearing? Lindsay finally looked at him. There were tears in her eyes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like guilt. Or was it fear? "The papers are being filed Monday," Glenn said. "Full custody to Lindsay, supervised visitation only for you. Pending a psychological evaluation, of course." Jake's hand tightened in Wes's. "Dad, don't let them." Wes looked down at his son, then back at the 3 adults blocking the stairs. In the distance, he could hear sirens. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Glenn raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. This isn't about Jake's welfare. You've orchestrated this too carefully. What do you actually want?" A look passed between Glenn and Sylvia. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "We want what's best for our daughter and grandson," Sylvia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Try again." The sirens were getting closer. Glenn's expression hardened. "You signed a postnuptial agreement 5 years ago. Remember? When you refinanced the house." Wes did remember. Lindsay had said it was a formality, something her father's lawyer had suggested to protect both of them. He'd barely read it, trusted his wife, signed where she'd indicated. That agreement stipulates that in the event of divorce due to mental incapacity or abuse, all assets default to the non-impaired spouse, including your share of Tyler Works. Wes stared at him. Tyler Works was the engineering firm Wes had co-founded 3 years ago. They just landed 2 major contracts with the city. The company's valuation had quadrupled in the last 18 months. "You're trying to steal my company. We're trying to ensure Lindsay and Jake are provided for," Glenn corrected. The fact that you're breaking down doors and assaulting family members only proves our point about your instability. The police cars were pulling into the driveway. Wes looked at Lindsay again, really looked at her. The woman he'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and cried when he proposed. The woman who'd held his hand when Jake was born and whispered that she'd never been happier. "Is this what you want?" he asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her father. "Lindsay, I'm asking you, is this what you want?" Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. They said, Dad said you wouldn't fight it if." "If what?" But Glenn was already moving down the stairs toward the approaching officers, and Mark was right behind him, touching the blood on his temple for emphasis. Sylvia put her arm around Lindsay's shoulders, steering her away. Wes knew what was about to happen. He'd be arrested, charged with breaking and entering at minimum, assault if Mark pressed it. Glenn would have a lawyer waiting. The custody papers would be filed Monday, and Wes would be fighting from behind bars or at best, from the wrong side of a restraining order. He knelt down in front of Jake. "Buddy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. No matter what happens in the next few days, I want you to remember that I love you more than anything in the world. And I'm going to fix this. Don't let them take me," Jake whispered. "I won't. I promise. But I need you to be brave for a little bit longer, okay? Can you do that?" Jake nodded, tears streaming down his face. The police were at the door. Wes stood up slowly, hands visible. What he didn't tell his son, what he couldn't say with the Marsh family listening, was that he'd already figured out the first piece of the puzzle. Glenn Marsh hadn't just said, "You're not on the list," as a generic dismissal. He'd said it with the confidence of someone who'd planned for exactly this scenario. The padlock on Jake's door hadn't been a panicked improvisation. The 5 cars in the driveway, the drawn curtains, the perfectly timed call to police, all of it coordinated. And if they planned this so carefully, they'd made mistakes. They had to have. Everyone did. As the officers entered, one hand on their weapons, asking everyone stay calm, Wes made eye contact with Glenn Marsh one more time. Glenn smiled, triumphant. Wes smiled back, because Glenn Marsh had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd threatened Wes's son, and now, instead of trying to save his marriage or defend himself against vague accusations, Wes had perfect clarity of purpose. He was going to destroy them all. The holding cell at the county station was cleaner than Wes expected. He sat on the metal bench, hands clasped, running through everything he knew. They'd arrested him for criminal trespass and assault. Mark had pressed charges, showing off the cut on his temple for the officers, claiming Wes had attacked him unprovoked. Glenn had given a statement about Wes's increasingly erratic behavior and threats against the family. Lindsay had said nothing, standing beside her father like a ghost. Jake had screamed when they led Wes away. That sound would haunt him, but they'd released him 6 hours later. No charges filed yet, pending investigation. The assistant district attorney had given him a hard look and told him to stay away from the Marsh residence. A temporary restraining order was being processed. He'd have to surrender his firearms, not that he owned any. Wes's business partner, Paul Reeves, had picked him up at midnight. They'd driven in silence back to Paul's house, where Wes's car was still parked. "You want to tell me what the hell happened?" Paul finally asked. Wes did. All of it. The note, the locked door, Jake's message, Glenn's revelation about the post-nuptial agreement and Tyler Works. Paul was quiet for a long moment. He was 10 years older than Wes, a mechanical engineer who'd partnered with Wes to form Tyler Works after they'd both quit a larger firm. He had 3 kids of his own, all grown now, and he'd been through his own messy divorce years ago. "The post-nup," Paul said finally. "You have a copy?" "I must have signed it, but I never got one. It was during the refinancing." Lindsay said her dad's lawyer handled everything. "Who was the lawyer?" "Kenneth Phillips. He's in Glenn's golf club." "Of course he is." Paul drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "And they're claiming you're mentally unstable. They've been building a case for months, setting me up, recording our fights they provoked, documenting incidents that never happened or that they twisted. But you actually did kick the door down today. My son was locked in a room. He had a note that said they were lying." "I know. I'm just saying, from a legal standpoint, they've got you cornered. Restraining order, Assault charges pending, custody filing Monday. Even if you can prove the post-nup was fraudulent, it'll take months. Years, maybe. And in the meantime, Glenn controls Lindsay. Lindsay has Jake, and you're shut out. Wes leaned his head back against the seat. Paul was right. Every legal avenue would take time he didn't have. The system would grind slowly forward while Glenn consolidated control. By the time Wes could mount a proper defense, Jake would be so thoroughly turned against him that it might not matter. There's something else, Wes said. Something Jake started to tell me. He said he'd heard Glenn and Mark talking about something they were trying to do. He didn't finish. Trying to do what? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not just about the company. This feels bigger. Paul was quiet again. Then, Glenn Marsh has been involved in some questionable business deals over the years. Nothing provable, but there were rumors when he was in commercial real estate. Properties that changed hands right before zoning decisions went his way. Competitors who suddenly faced regulatory problems. You think he's dirty. I think he's the kind of man who sees the world as a series of transactions. And right now, you're on the wrong side of his ledger. Paul looked at him. What are you going to do? Wes thought about Jake's face at that window. The fear in his eyes. The desperation in his scrawled note. I'm going to get my son back. And I'm going to make sure Glenn Marsh never threatens my family again. Ow! I don't know yet. But I'm not playing by their rules anymore. Wes spent Sunday alone in his apartment, making lists. Everything he knew about Glenn Marsh. Everything he knew about the post-nuptial agreement. Everyone who might have information about the Marsh family's business dealings. Every moment in the past 6 months that had fell off that he'd dismissed as paranoia or stress. He called his own lawyer, Doug Ramirez, who'd handled the Tyler Works Incorporation, and got voicemail. He tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, Doug's secretary answered. I'm sorry, Mr. Tyler, but Mr. Ramirez can't represent you in this matter. There's a conflict of interest. What conflict? He's been retained by Mrs. Tyler's family. Of course. Glenn would have thought of that too. Wes called 6 more attorneys. 3 wouldn't take his call once they heard his name. 2 said they were already booked. 1 was honest enough to admit that Glenn Marsh had a lot of influence in the local legal community, and taking Wes's case would be professionally complicated. By evening, Wes had 1 name, Angelina Bernard, a family law attorney in the city who'd recently moved to the area. She agreed to meet him Monday morning. Wes made dinner he didn't eat and tried to watch TV he didn't process. Every few minutes, he'd check his phone, hoping for a message from Lindsay. From Jake. From anyone. Nothing. At 10 p.m., there was a knock at his door. Wes looked through the peepholes. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. He didn't recognize her. Wes Tyler, she called through the door. Who are you? My name is Christine Hess. I'm a private investigator. I think I can help you. Wes opened the door, but kept the chain on. I didn't hire a private investigator. No, but you should. She held up a business card. I've been investigating Glenn Marsh for 2 months. Different case, same tactics. When I heard about your situation, I thought we might be able to help each other. What's your case? Client confidentiality. But I can tell you that Glenn Marsh has a pattern. He identifies people with assets he wants. He gets close to them through his daughter or his business connections. Then he manufactures a crisis, usually involving accusations of instability or abuse, and uses the chaos to force a settlement or take control of assets. Wes's blood went cold. He's done this before. At least 3 times that I can prove. All of them settled quietly. All of them with NDAs. But one of his victims is ready to talk, and he hired me to build a case. Why are you telling me this? Christine smiled grimly. Because you kicked down his door yesterday. That's not how his victims usually respond. Most of them roll over, take the settlement, disappear. But you fought back, and that makes you dangerous to him, which makes you useful to me. What do you want? I want Glenn Marsh to go to jail, or at least lose everything he's stolen. My client wants justice. You want your son back. I think we can work together. Wes studied her through the gap in the door. She looked tired, like she'd been working this case too long. But her eyes were sharp, and she met his gaze without flinching. Tell me about the other victims, he said. Let me in, and I will. Wes closed the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it again. Christine Hess stepped inside, pulling a tablet from her bag. First victim, she said, pulling up a photo. Rick Gardner, tech startup founder. Met Glenn through a business networking group. Glenn introduced him to his daughter. Different daughter than Lindsay. This was 7 years ago. They dated for 6 months. Rick's company was about to go public. Suddenly, the daughter claimed Rick had been abusing her. Glenn supported his daughter, helped her file charges. In the chaos, Rick signed over a significant chunk of his equity to settle the claims. The charges were dropped. The daughter disappeared. Rick's company went public. Glenn made millions. Rick got nothing and a restraining order that ruined his reputation. Jesus. Second victim, Anthony Maxwell, real estate developer. Married one of Glenn's business associates' daughters. Glenn brokered the introduction. 2 years in, similar pattern. Claims of abuse, custody battle, forced asset division. Anthony fought it for a while, but Glenn had manufactured so much evidence that Anthony eventually settled. Lost his company, lost access to his kids, moved across the country. And the third, Christine's expression hardened. Leon Chong. That's my client. Software engineer, brilliant guy. Met Lindsay's sister at a charity event Glenn hosted. Married her. 3 years later, Glenn started the same playbook. But Leon's wife actually loved him. She tried to warn him, tried to refuse to cooperate. So Glenn turned on her too. Made it look like she was unstable, like Leon had manipulated her. Had her committed for a psychiatric evaluation that lasted 3 weeks. By the time she got out, Glenn had control of Leon's patents, his company, everything. Leon's wife divorced him under threat. Glenn said if she didn't, he'd make sure she never got out of the mental hospital. That's illegal. That's kidnapping, fraud, extortion. It's all of those things. But Glenn's been very careful. He uses legitimate legal procedures, just twisted. He has lawyers who know how to work the system. Doctors who will write the evaluations he needs. Judges who owe him favors. He's been doing this for years, and he's very, very good at it. Wes sat down heavily on the couch. So what's the plan? You gather evidence. Take it to the police. The police won't touch him without ironclad proof. I'm working on it, but it's slow. Meanwhile, you're about to lose your son and your company. Unless we move faster. Ow! Christine sat across from him. Glenn Marsh's weakness is his arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable because he's gotten away with it before. He doesn't expect his victims to fight back. But if we can get him to overreach, to make a mistake while we're watching, we can build a criminal case instead of just a civil one. You want me to be bait? I want you to be smart. Glenn's already showing his hand. The custody filing tomorrow, the assault charges he's holding over you, the postnuptial agreement that's clearly fraudulent. He's moving too fast because Tyler Works is worth too much to wait. That's a weakness. How do I use it? Christine pulled up more files on her tablet. First, we get you a real lawyer. Angelina Bernard's good. I've worked with her before. Second, we start documenting everything. Every communication with the Marsh family, every legal move they make. Third, we find a crack in Glenn's operation. The one person who might be willing to talk. Lindsay. She's the most likely. From what I can tell, she's not like Glenn. She's scared. He's probably threatened her too. Wes thought about Lindsay's face yesterday. The guilt, the fear, the way she'd looked at her father before speaking. He's got something on her, Wes said slowly. Something that makes her comply. Probably. We need to find out what. Because if we can get Lindsay to turn on him, the whole house of cards collapses. And Jake. Christine's expression softened. We get you emergency custody. Not through the courts. That'll take too long. We prove that Jake's in danger, that Glenn's operation constitutes abuse. Child Protective Services can move fast when there's evidence. What evidence? The padlock on his door is a start. Kidnapping, because that's what this was, taking him without your knowledge or consent. If we can get Jake to testify about what he heard, what he's seen, I won't put him through that. You might not have a choice. Glenn's going to use him as leverage. The question is whether you let that happen or whether you trust Jake to be brave enough to tell the truth. Wes closed his eyes. Jake pressing that note against the window. They're lying. Help Dad. His son was already being brave. The question was whether Wes would be smart enough to make it count. Okay, he said. Tell me what I need to do. Christine smiled. First thing tomorrow, we meet with Angelina, then we start building your case. And then, she pulled up one more file, this one showing a network diagram. Then we figure out exactly what Glenn Marsh is planning. Because I promise you, stealing your company is only part of it. Wes leaned forward, studying the diagram. Names connected by lines. Glenn at the center. Mark, Sylvia, Kenneth Phillips, the lawyer. Several names Wes didn't recognize. And at the edge, almost separate from the rest, Lindsay. What is this? Glenn's network. Everyone he uses for these operations. Some of them are victims who became accomplices. Some are true believers. But all of them are connected to him in ways that make them vulnerable. How do you break something like this? Christine looked at him levelly. You find the person who wants out the most, and you offer them a way to survive what's coming. Wes studied Lindsay's name on the chart. 10 years of marriage. A child together. Love that had slowly eroded under pressure he hadn't understood until yesterday. She asked me a question once, he said quietly. About a year after we got married. She asked if I'd ever let anyone come between us. I said never. I meant it. And now I'm going to find out if she meant it too. Monday morning, Wes met Angelina Bernard in her office downtown. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a directness he appreciated. I've reviewed the information Ms. Hess sent over, Angelina said, pulling up files on her computer. And I've done some research on Glenn Marsh. Mr. Tyler, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You're in serious trouble. I know. The custody filing came through this morning. Full custody to Lindsay, supervised visitation for you pending psychological evaluation. They're citing the incident on Saturday, plus a dozen other alleged incidents over the past 6 months. They have witness statements from Glenn, Sylvia, and Mark Marsh. They have text messages that they claim show threatening behavior. They have notes from family dinners where you allegedly exhibited paranoid and aggressive behavior. It's all manufactured. I believe you, but proving that will take time. Meanwhile, the family court judge has issued a temporary order. You're not allowed contact with Jake except for supervised visits, 2 hours per week, at a facility of the court's choosing. Wes felt sick. 2 hours. It's temporary. We can fight it. But it's going to be an uphill battle. The judge is Warren Keating. He's traditional. He tends to favor mothers in custody disputes, and he takes allegations of abuse very seriously. Glenn must have known that. I'm certain he did. Judge Keating is exactly who you'd pick if you were trying to shut out a father. Christine, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. What about the padlock? Jake being locked in a room? I'm filing a motion about that this afternoon. But Glenn's lawyer, Kenneth Phillips, has already submitted a statement claiming the padlock was a temporary safety measure because Jake was emotionally dysregulated and they were concerned he might hurt himself. They have a therapist's note to back it up. What therapist? Dr. Camille Mahoney. She's been seeing Jake for the past month, apparently. Did you know about that? Wes shook his head. Lindsay never mentioned it. I would have remembered. I ask about Jake every day. The therapist's note says Jake has been exhibiting signs of trauma related to your alleged abuse. It recommends limited contact pending further evaluation. This is insane. It's thorough, Angelina corrected. Glenn Marsh has been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every piece fits together. Every angle covered. He's very good at this. So what do I do? Angelina sat back in her chair. Normally, I'd say we play defense. We respond to each filing. We counter each accusation. We request our own evaluations. It would take 6 months to a year, but we'd probably win. You're Jake's father. You've been present his whole life, and there's no actual evidence of abuse. But I don't think Glenn's going to wait 6 months. He wants control of Tyler Works now, which means he's going to push for a quick settlement. He'll dangle access to Jake in front of you, offer to drop the charges, maybe even agree to joint custody. All you have to do is sign over your stake in the company. Wes clenched his jaw. And if I refuse, then he destroys you. The charges go forward. The custody battle gets uglier. He'll drag it out until you're bankrupt from legal fees and broken from fighting. Eventually, you'll give in just to make it stop. I won't. Angelina studied him. I believe you. Which brings me to option 2, which is we go on offense. We don't just defend against his accusations. We investigate him. We build a case that he's the real threat to Jake's welfare. We expose his pattern of behavior, and we force him to defend himself instead of attacking you. That's what Christine's been doing. Yes, and between her evidence and what we can gather through legal discovery, we might have enough to flip this. But it's risky. We'll be accusing a prominent local businessman of fraud, extortion, and child endangerment. If we're wrong, or if we can't prove it, you'll look paranoid and vindictive. It'll only strengthen his case. We're not wrong. Then we need to be smart and fast. Angelina pulled up a calendar. Your first supervised visit with Jake is scheduled for Wednesday. 2 hours at the Children's Connection Center. That gives us 2 days to gather evidence and file our countermotions. What kind of evidence? Christine has her files on the other victims. We need depositions from them, if they'll talk. We need financial records showing Glenn's connections to the shell companies that benefited from those cases. We need proof that the therapist, Dr. Mahoney, has a relationship with Glenn that compromises her objectivity. And we need to find out what Jake knows. They'll have coaching by now. Maybe. But kids are more resilient than we think. And more truthful. If Jake really did overhear something important, he'll tell you. The question is whether we can use it in court. Wes thought about his son's note. They're lying. Simple, direct, true. What about Lindsay? He asked. Angelina and Christine exchange a look. What? I did some digging over the weekend, Christine said. Lindsay's sister, the one who married Leon Chong. Her name was Natasha. She died 3 years ago. Car accident on a mountain road. Single vehicle crash. No witnesses. Wes felt cold. You think Glenn? I think it's suspicious. Leon said Natasha was planning to leave Glenn's orbit to cut ties with the family. A week later, she's dead. The police ruled it an accident. But the timing is convenient. Lindsay never talked about her sister. I knew she died, but she wouldn't discuss it. She just shut down. That might be the leverage Glenn has over her, Angelina said quietly. If Lindsay suspects her father had something to do with Natasha's death, if he's threatened her with the same fate if she doesn't cooperate, then she's a prisoner too. A willing one, maybe, but still a prisoner. Wes stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the city moved through its Monday morning routine. People going to work, living normal lives, unaware of the quiet war being waged in conference rooms and courtrooms. How do I reach her? He asked. The restraining order prohibits you from contacting her directly, Angelina finished. But it doesn't prohibit her from contacting you. If she wants to talk, she knows where to find you. She won't. Not while Glenn's watching. Then we have to give her a reason to take that risk. Christine stood up, joining him at the window. Glenn's going to feel very confident right now. He's got you boxed in, his plans are working, and you're supposed to be spiraling into panic. That's when people make mistakes. So I play along. Act defeated. For now. Meanwhile, we work behind the scenes. I keep investigating. Angelina files the necessary motions. And you, she looked at him. You need to figure out what Glenn really wants. Because I promise you, it's not just your company. What else could there be? That's what we need to find out. Wes left the meeting with a list of tasks and a growing sense that he was in deeper than he'd realized. Glenn wasn't just a greedy father-in-law trying to steal his assets. He was something more dangerous. A man who'd built an entire system for destroying people, who'd been doing it for years, and who'd never been stopped. But Wes had something Glenn's other victims hadn't. He fought back immediately. He hadn't accepted the script Glenn had written. And that meant the playbook wasn't working quite as smoothly as Glenn expected. The question was how to use that advantage. Wes spent the afternoon at Tyler Works, going through files and talking to Paul Reeves. The company was in good shape. 2 major contracts with the city, 3 smaller projects in development, plans for expansion. On paper, it was worth about $8 million. In reality, with the right buyer, it could go for triple that. Glenn must have known about the city contracts before we did, Paul said. That's why he moved now. Once those projects are complete, we'll have a reputation that makes the company even more valuable. Can we lock down ownership? Make it harder for him to take it? We could try. I talked to our corporate lawyer this morning. She's drafting new bylaws that require unanimous board approval for any ownership transfers. But if you're declared mentally incompetent, that might not matter. The court could appoint a conservator to make decisions for you. Let me guess. Glenn would volunteer for that position. Almost certainly. Wes rubbed his eyes. What's our runway if this gets ugly? If I'm tied up in court for months? 3 months, maybe 4, before we start missing payroll. After that, Paul shrugged. We'd have to take on debt or fine investors, which would dilute our ownership and make us vulnerable to takeover. So Glenn's timeline makes sense. Drag it out just long enough to weaken the company, then swoop in with an offer to help Lindsay by buying it at a discount. That'd be my guess. Wes's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered. Mr. Tyler? A woman's voice, nervous. My name is Tricia Pham. I work at Dr. Mahoney's office. The therapist who's been seeing your son. Wes straightened. Yes. I'm calling because I think you should know something. Dr. Mahoney's sessions with Jake aren't. They're not real therapy. She's coaching him, telling him what to say about you. Can you prove that? I have session notes. The real ones, not the ones she files with the court. She keeps 2 sets. The official ones say Jake is showing signs of trauma. The real ones say he talks about you constantly, that he misses you, that he's confused about why he can't see you. Wes gripped the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong. I'm a therapist too. I'm doing my clinical hours under Dr. Mahoney's supervision. But this isn't therapy. It's manipulation. And that little boy is suffering because of it. Will you testify to that? Silence. Then I could lose my license. Dr. Mahoney has connections. She could make sure I never work in this field again. But you're calling me anyway. Because I have a son too. And if someone was doing this to him. She took a breath. I'll help you. But I need protection. A guarantee that I won't be destroyed for doing the right thing. I'll talk to my lawyer. We'll figure something out. Can you email me the session notes? I can't. They're in Dr. Mahoney's locked files. But I can tell you what's in them. And I can testify about what I've witnessed. That might be enough. Where can I reach you? She gave him a number. Please be careful, Mr. Tyler. Glenn Marsh he's dangerous. Dr. Mahoney is terrified of him. She does what he says because she has to. Does she have to? I think he's blackmailing her. Something about her past. I don't know the details, but I've seen the way she reacts when he calls. After Tricia hung up, Wes immediately called Angelina. We have a witness, he told her. Someone inside Dr. Mahoney's operation who's willing to talk. That's great, but we need to be careful. Glenn will see this coming. If he's been blackmailing the therapist, he's got contingencies. So what do? We move fast. Get Tricia's testimony recorded before Glenn knows she's turned. File it with our counter motion tomorrow. Catch him off guard. And hope he doesn't have time to silence her. Exactly. Wes hung up and sat in his office, staring at the blueprints on his wall. Designs for buildings that would last decades, engineered to withstand storms and earthquakes in time. Structures built on solid foundations. Glenn Marsh had built his empire on lies and intimidation. It looked solid, but it wasn't. It was all leverage and pressure and calculated fear, which meant it could be dismantled if you found the right weak point. The question was whether Wes could find it before Glenn destroyed everything Wes loved. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the coffee shop on Maple and 3rd. 9 p.m. Come alone. L. Lindsay. Wes stared at the message. It could be a trap. Glenn could be monitoring her phone, setting up another incident to add to his case. But it could also be the crack in the wall that Christine had talked about. The one person who might want out enough to take the risk. He texted back, I'll be there. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 9 on a Monday night. Wes sat in the back corner, facing the door, a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking cooling in front of him. Lindsay arrived 10 minutes late. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd always been beautiful, but tonight she just looked tired. She sat down across from him without ordering anything. I have 20 minutes, she said. Dad thinks I'm at the pharmacy. Does he track you? He tracks everyone. She laughed bitterly. You probably think I'm a monster. For what I did to you. I think you're scared. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and her eyes filled with tears. I am. I'm so scared, Wes. All the time. Of what? Of him. Of what he'll do if I don't cooperate. Of what he's already done. Natasha. Lindsay flinched. You know about her. I'm starting to. Your sister married Leon Chong. Then she died in a car accident. Right after she tried to leave Glenn's orbit. It wasn't an accident. Lindsay's voice was barely a whisper. She told me she was going to go to the police. About Dad. About what he was doing to Leon. The next day, her brakes failed on Highway 9. The police said it was just worn brake pads, but Natasha had just had her car serviced the week before. New brakes, new everything. You think Glenn tampered with her car? I know he did. Or he had someone do it. Mark, maybe. Or one of his other people. I don't have proof, but I know. She wiped her eyes. After she died, Dad sat me down. He said, sometimes people make choices that put everyone at risk. He said families have to protect each other. He said Natasha had forgotten that. And look what happened. He threatened you. Not directly. He never does anything directly. But I understood. If I didn't help him, if I tried to leave, if I went to the police, there might be another accident. Maybe involving Jake this time. Wes felt rage building in his chest, white-hot and focused. Lindsay, he can't. Yes, he can. You don't know him like I do. You see the successful businessman, the respectable father. I've seen the other side. The man who destroys anyone who crosses him. The man who always gets what he wants. So you let him use you. Use our son. I thought I could protect Jake by cooperating. I thought if I just went along with it, helped Dad get what he wanted, he'd leave us alone after. That Jake and I could start over somewhere. And you'd be okay without us. Without my son, without my wife. Lindsay, I would never be okay with that. I know. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Wes. But I don't know how to stop him. He's planned everything. Every move. Every contingency. He's 3 steps ahead, always. Then we get 4 steps ahead. Ow! You tell me everything. What he's planning, what he wants, who his allies are. Every detail. And we use it against him. Lindsay shook her head. If he finds out I talked to you, he won't. We're careful. We're smart. And we make sure that when we move, we take him down completely. So he can't retaliate. It's not possible. He's too. Lindsay. Wes reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. Jake pressed a note against the window. He wrote, "They're lying. Help Dad. Our 8-year-old son is braver than both of us put together right now. We owe it to him to try." She looked at his hand, then at his face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, there's more. More than just the company. Dad's planning something bigger. What? He's been having meetings. With people I don't know. Showing them documents about the city contracts Tyler Works has. He's not just trying to steal your company. He's trying to use it for something else. For what? I don't know exactly. But I've heard him talking to Mark about the stadium project. About how once Dad controls Tyler Works, he can adjust the specifications to his advantage. And about payments coming from someone he calls the developer. Wes's mind raced. The stadium project. The city was planning a new downtown stadium, one of the biggest infrastructure projects in decades. Tyler Works had bid on the structural engineering contract. They'd thought they were frontrunners, but the decision hadn't been announced yet. Glenn's going to bribe his way into the contract. Worse, he's going to use your reputation to win it legitimately, then change the designs to use cheaper materials or cut corners. The developer pays him under the table, the city gets a substandard stadium, and Dad makes millions. If anything goes wrong, it's your company's name on the blueprints. You take the fall. That's fraud. Criminal fraud. People could die if the structure fails. I know, but how do you prove it? By the time anyone figures it out, the stadium will be built, the money will be hidden, and Dad will have covered his tracks. Wes sat back, the full scope of Glenn's plan coming into focus. It wasn't just about stealing Tyler Works. It was about using it as a vehicle for a much bigger crime. And if anything went wrong, Wes would be the one blamed, the mentally unstable engineer who'd cut corners while his company fell apart. When's the contract decision? Next month. Dad's been pushing to expedite the custody case, so he has control before then. We have a month then to stop him. Wes, you're not listening. He's planned for this. He has judges in his pocket, police who owe him favors, lawyers who'll do whatever he says. How do we fight that? By being smarter than he is. By finding the one thing he didn't plan for. What's that? Me not giving up, and you deciding to help me. Lindsay looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached in her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Financial records, she said. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails. Everything I could copy from Dad's office without him noticing. It's not organized, and I don't understand most of it, but it's all there. His deals with the other victims. The payments to Dr. Mahoney and Judge Keating and everyone else in his network. Everything. Wes took the drive carefully, like it might explode. Lindsay, I'm still scared. I'm still not sure we can win. But you're right about Jake. He deserves better than this. Better than me being too afraid to do the right thing. She stood up. I have to go. Dad will notice if I'm gone too long. Wait. Wednesday, I have a supervised visit with Jake. Will you bring him? Dad insists on being there. He doesn't trust me anymore, I think. He's watching me constantly. Then we be careful. But Lindsay, I need you to do something for me. What? Tell Jake I love him. Every day. No matter what Glenn says, no matter what happens in court, I need Jake to know that I'm fighting for him. He knows. He talks about you constantly. Drives Dad crazy. She almost smiled. He's so much like you. Stubborn. Brave. Too brave for his own good. He gets that from his mom, too. She left without saying goodbye. Wes sat alone in the coffee shop, holding the USB drive and feeling like the ground beneath him had shifted. For 2 days, he'd been playing defense, reacting to Glenn's moves, trying to survive. But now he had weapons. Evidence. Leverage. Now he could fight back. He called Christine. I have something you need to see. Lindsay gave me files. Financial records. Everything. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes. Then he called Angelina. We need to accelerate everything. I have evidence that Glenn's planning more than fraud. He's planning to sabotage a city infrastructure project. We're talking criminal charges, federal investigation, level stuff. Send me what you have. I'll review it tonight. Wes drove home, his mind already 3 steps ahead. Glenn had been planning for months, building his case carefully, covering every angle. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Wes would break. Though when faced with losing his son and his company, Wes would crumble like the other victims had. That fear and exhaustion would wear him down until he accepted whatever settlement Glenn offered. But Glenn hadn't counted on Jake's note, on Lindsay's courage, on Trisha Pham's conscience, on all the small acts of rebellion that his victims and accomplices had been too afraid to attempt until now. Most of all, Glenn hadn't counted on Wes being the kind of man who got more determined when cornered, who'd spent his career solving impossible engineering problems by finding the weak point in the structure and applying force exactly where it mattered most. Glenn Marsh had declared war on the wrong man. And now, Wes Tyler was going to show him exactly what that meant. By midnight, Wes's apartment had become a war room. Christine had brought her files. Angelina had arrived with her laptop and a legal pad covered in notes. Paul Reeves had come too, after Wes called him with a brief explanation. They spread everything across the dining table. Lindsay's USB drive contained hundreds of files. Bank statements showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. Emails between Glenn and Kenneth Phillips discussing asset acquisition strategies. Text messages with Mark about handling problems. A spreadsheet labeled targets with names and net worth estimates. Rick Gardner, $4.2 million recovered Anthony Maxwell. $2.8 million recovered Leon Chong. $6.1 million recovered Wes Tyler. $8 million estimated. And at the bottom, 2 new names. Kevin Fields, $12 million estimated Robert Wells. $15 million estimated. He's already planning his next victims, Paul said quietly. Christine was going through the emails. Look at this. Glenn and Kenneth Phillips discussing the post-nuptial agreement. They specifically designed it to be defensible enough that you'd sign it without thinking, but exploitable enough that they could use it later. And here, an email to Dr. Mahoney. Glenn tells her exactly what to write in Jake's evaluation. Word for word. That's malpractice, Angelina said. We can have her license revoked. And here's the stadium project. Wes pulled up another file. Payments from something called Cascade Development LLC to Glenn's account. $300,000 last month. $500,000 2 months before that. The memo says consulting fees, but look at the dates. Each payment comes right after Glenn had a meeting with someone in the city planning department. Bribes, Paul said. He's bribing city officials to steer the stadium contract to whoever Cascade Development wants. And once he controls Tyler Works, he can make sure the design uses Cascade's preferred materials and subcontractors, even if they're not qualified, even if the building won't be safe. Angelina was typing rapidly. This is enough for a criminal investigation. I can file a complaint with the Attorney General's office tomorrow. Wire fraud, bribery, conspiracy. Glenn's looking at serious federal charges. How long until they act? Wes asked. Weeks, maybe months. They'll need to verify the evidence, interview witnesses, build a case. That's too long. Glenn files for custody tomorrow. The judge rules by the end of the week. Then we need to present this to the family court judge. Show him that Glenn is under federal investigation. That'll change everything. Will Judge Keating listen? Christine looked up from her tablet. Keating's name is in these files. Glenn made a donation to his re-election campaign last year. $50,000. So he's bought. Not necessarily, but he's compromised. He might refuse to recuse himself, claim the donation wasn't large enough to influence him. Meanwhile, Glenn gets the ruling he wants. Wes stood up, pacing. They had evidence. They had witnesses. They had everything they needed to destroy Glenn Marsh. But it all took time, and time was the one thing Wes didn't have. We need to flip someone, he said. Someone in Glenn's network. Someone who's in deep enough to testify, but scared enough to turn. Lindsay's already helping, Angelina pointed out. She's not enough. Her testimony will be seen as a wife siding with her husband. Glenn will claim she's being manipulated. We need someone Glenn trusts. Someone who can testify about his methods from the inside. Mark, Paul suggested. He's Glenn's muscle, but he's not as smart. Maybe he's starting to realize how exposed he is. Or Kenneth Phillips, Christine said. The lawyer. He's involved in everything. If he flips, he can give us all of Glenn's clients, all his schemes going back years. Wes thought about it. Mark was a thug, loyal to his father, and not bright enough to see the walls closing in. Kenneth Phillips was a lawyer, which meant he'd covered himself legally and probably had immunity deals ready if things went south. But there was one person they hadn't considered. One person who'd been in the background of everything, but who might have their own reasons to turn. Sylvia, Wes said. Lindsay's mother. The room went quiet. Think about it, Wes continued. Sylvia's been married to Glenn for what, 30 years? She's seen everything. She knows where all the bodies are buried. Maybe literally, given what happened to Natasha. And she's protected him because she's complicit. But what if we offer her a way out? Why would she take it? Angelina asked. Because she's terrified of him too. You've seen how she acts around Glenn. She never contradicts him. Never speaks unless he gives her permission. She's as much a prisoner as Lindsay was. But she participated in kidnapping Jake. Paul objected. She's criminally liable too, which means she needs immunity. We offer her full immunity in exchange for testimony against Glenn. She tells us everything, every scheme, every victim, every corrupt official. And she walks away free while Glenn goes to prison. Christine nodded slowly. It could work, but we need the Attorney General's office to sign off on the immunity deal. And we need to approach Sylvia carefully. If she tells Glenn we contacted her, she won't. Because we're not going to threaten her. We're going to save her. Ow! Wes pulled up one of the files Lindsay had given him. An email from Glenn to Kenneth Phillips discussing the Sylvia situation. The email was vague, but the tone was ominous. Something about ensuring her continued cooperation and implementing the contingency plan if she becomes a liability. Glenn's already planning to dispose of her, Wes said. Just like he did with Natasha. Sylvia must suspect it. We just have to prove it to her. Tuesday morning, Wes had his second meeting with Angelina. They'd worked through the night, preparing documents and filing motions. The counter-motion to Glenn's custody petition was 100 pages long, citing Trisha Pham's testimony about the fraudulent therapy sessions, Lindsay's evidence of Glenn's criminal enterprise, and the pattern of abuse across multiple victims. "This is good," Angelina said, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "This is really good. But Judge Keating is going to resist. He'll claim we're making wild accusations to distract from the assault charge. He'll say we need to go through proper channels." So we go over his head. To whom? The appellate court won't hear this until after his ruling. To the media. Angelina looked at him sharply. "That's risky. If we go public with accusations we can't prove. We can prove them. We have Lindsay's files. We have Christine's investigation. We have witnesses. What we don't have is time to let the system work at its usual pace. So we force Glenn to respond in public, where he can't control the narrative. You'll destroy any chance of settlement. Glenn will fight this to the end." "Good. I don't want a settlement. I want him in prison." Angelina studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Okay, I know a reporter, investigative journalist, works for the Tribune. She's been looking for a story like this for years. I'll make the call." While Angelina contacted the reporter, Wes met with Paul at Tyler Works. They needed to secure the company against whatever Glenn might try next. "I've updated our bylaws," Paul said. "You and I are now the only board members with voting rights on ownership transfers. Even if a court orders it, we could delay implementation for months through legal challenges. What about our contracts? Can Glenn interfere with those?" "He can try, but we've been documenting everything. Every communication, every design decision, every approval. If Glenn tries to sabotage us, we'll have a paper trail proving it." "Good. What about the stadium project? The city's supposed to announce the winner next week. We're still the front runner, but Glenn's been making calls. I've heard he's meeting with the city manager tomorrow to make his pitch. Once he has control of the company, he'll be the one accepting the contract. Unless we stop him first." Wes's phone rang. "Christine, I found Sylvia," she said. "She's a spa outside the city. Goes there every Tuesday afternoon. Alone." "You're sure?" "I've been tracking her movements for 2 weeks. It's the only time Glenn doesn't have someone watching her. I think she arranged it that way deliberately." "Can you approach her?" "I think it should be you. She needs to hear from someone she knows. Someone who understands what Glenn is." Wes checked his watch. "Where?" Christine gave him the address. "Be careful. If Glenn finds out." "He won't." The spa was in a converted Victorian house, all soft colors and quiet music. Wes felt absurdly out of place as he walked in, but the receptionist smiled and asked if he had an appointment. "I'm here to see Sylvia Marsh," he said. "Family matter. She'll want to talk to me." The receptionist looked uncertain, but picked up the phone. A minute later, she gestured toward a sitting room. "Mrs. Marsh will see you." Sylvia was waiting in a private room, still in her spa robe, her face carefully neutral. But Wes could see the fear in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know, but I need to talk to you. And this was the only place Glenn can't hear us. He hears everything. Not here. Not now. Sylvia, I know what he's planning. I know about the stadium project, the fraud, the bribes. I know about Natasha." She flinched. "You don't know anything. I know Glenn killed her, or had her killed, because she was going to expose him. And I know you suspect it too." Sylvia's facade cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and she suddenly looked 10 years older. "You can't prove it. Maybe not yet. But I can protect you from him doing the same thing to you." "He wouldn't. Wouldn't he?" "Sylvia, you're a liability now. You know too much. You've been part of his schemes for decades, which means you can testify against him. How long before he decides you're too dangerous to keep around?" She was shaking now. "He's my husband. He's a monster. And you know it. You've known it for years, and you've helped him anyway because you were too afraid to stop. But it's over now. He's going to be caught. The only question is whether you go down with him or whether you save yourself. By betraying him, by telling the truth. About everything. In exchange for immunity. You walk away free, Sylvia. You get to start over, away from him, away from all of this. He'll kill me. Not if he's in prison. And I'm going to make sure that happens. But I need your help." Sylvia looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can. Think about Lindsay. About Jake. About all the people Glenn's destroyed. Don't you want to stop him? I wanted to stop him 30 years ago. But I didn't. I let him turn me into... She couldn't finish. Then stop him now. It's not too late. She sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she whispered, what do you need? Everything. Every scheme. Every victim. Every crime. And testimony about Natasha. What really happened? He covered it so well. The break lines, he had Mark do it. I didn't know until after. Glenn told me what happened like it was nothing. Like she brought it on herself by being disloyal. He said families protect each other. And sometimes that means making hard choices. She looked at Wes. I've been terrified ever since that I'd be next. You won't be. I promise. But you have to trust me. Sylvia wiped her eyes. I'll do it. But not for you. For Jake. He shouldn't grow up thinking this is normal. That his grandfather is someone to admire. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Glenn will know something's wrong. He always does. Let him. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. Wednesday morning, Wes arrived at the Children's Connection Center for his supervised visit with Jake. The center was designed to feel welcoming. Bright colors, toys, comfortable chairs. But it felt like a prison to Wes. 2 hours in a monitored room with his own son. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, explained the rules. No discussion of the custody case. No negative talk about Lindsay or her family. No attempts to influence Jake. All conversation would be monitored and recorded. Understood, Wes said. Jake arrived with Lindsay and Glenn. Mark was there too, leaning against the wall like hired security. Jake's face lit up when he saw Wes, but Glenn put a hand on the boy's shoulder, holding him back. Remember what we talked about? Glenn said quietly to Jake. Be polite, but you don't have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. Jake nodded, his enthusiasm dimming. Glenn looked at Wes with that same smug smile. 2 hours, Tyler. Make them count. The supervisor ushered Jake into the visiting room. Glenn started to follow, but the supervisor stopped him. Only the parent and child during visits, sir. You can wait in the lobby. Glenn's smile tightened, but he nodded. Of course. Jake, we'll be right outside if you need us. The door closed. Wes and Jake were alone, except for the camera in the corner and the supervisor at her desk. Jake rushed into Wes's arms. Dad! Wes held him tight, breathing in the familiar smell of his son's shampoo, feeling the solid weight of him. Hey, buddy. I missed you so much. I missed you too. Grandpa said you were sick, that you couldn't see me for a while. But I knew he was lying. Jake, I need you to be careful what you say. The camera. I don't care. They're lying about you. They say you're dangerous, but you're not. You're the best dad ever. Wes felt his throat tighten. I'm trying to fix this. I promise. I heard Grandpa talking. He said once he gets your company, he's going to make sure you never see me again. He said Mom will move with me to another city, and you won't even know where we are. Wes forced himself to stay calm. That's not going to happen. How do you know? Because I'm smarter than he is. And because I have help. Your mom is helping me. Jake's eyes widened. Really? But she's scared. Your grandpa has been threatening her. But she's brave like you. She gave me information that's going to stop him. What kind of information? Stuff that proves he's breaking the law. Hurting people. Once the police see it, he's going to be in big trouble. Jake thought about that. Good. I hate him. He's mean to Mom. And he locked me in my room when I tried to tell you what I heard. What did you hear exactly? Jake glanced at the camera, then whispered. He was talking to Uncle Mark about the stadium. About how they're going to use your company to build it wrong on purpose. So it costs less, but they get to keep the extra money. Uncle Mark said, what if someone gets hurt? And Grandpa said it doesn't matter because you'd be the one who'd go to jail. Did he say anything else? He said once he had your money, we'd all be rich. He told Mom she was going to thank him someday for making her do this. The supervisor was watching them. Wes knew the recording would be reviewed, probably by Kenneth Phillips, definitely by Glenn. He needed to be careful, but he also needed Jake to know the truth. Buddy, I need you to do something for me. Can you be really brave? I'm always brave. I know you are. I need you to write down everything you heard. Every conversation between Grandpa and Uncle Mark, or Grandpa and anyone else. Dates if you remember them, and what they said. Can you do that? Like a spy. Exactly like a spy. But don't let anyone see you doing it. Especially not Grandpa. Hide what you write somewhere safe. Where? Wes thought. Do you still have the hollowed-out book I gave you? The secret compartment one. Jake nodded. In my room at Grandpa's house. Perfect. Write everything there. And when this is over, we'll use it to make sure the truth comes out. They spent the rest of the 2 hours talking about baseball and school and Jake's upcoming birthday. Wes tried to act normal, tried to be the dad Jake needed him to be, even with the camera recording everything and Glenn waiting outside like a spider in its web. When time was up, Jake clung to him. Don't let them take me away forever. I won't. I promise. You trust me. Always. In the lobby, Glenn was waiting with his arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just took Jake's hand and led him toward the exit. Lindsay followed, but she turned back once to meet Wes's eyes. He nodded slightly. She nodded back. Mark smirked at Wes as he passed. See you in court, loser. Wes watched them leave, then headed to his car. He had a meeting with the Tribune reporter in an hour. Tonight, Angelina was filing the counter-motion with all the evidence. Tomorrow, Sylvia was meeting with the Attorney General's office to give her testimony. And by Friday, when Judge Keating was supposed to rule on custody, Glenn Marsh would be fighting for his freedom instead of stealing Wes's son. At least, that was the plan. Wes knew from experience that no plan survived contact with reality perfectly. There would be complications, unexpected moves, things he hadn't anticipated. But for the first time since he'd found that note on his kitchen table, Wes felt like he was playing offense instead of defense. And Glenn Marsh was about to learn what that meant. The Tribune reporter, Shannon Robinson, met Wes at a diner downtown. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a recorder that she set on the table between them. Angelina says you have a story for me, she said. About Glenn Marsh. Wes had prepared for this conversation. He'd organized the evidence, worked out what could be said publicly and what needed to stay confidential for now, practiced staying calm while discussing the man who tried to destroy his family. Glenn Marsh has been running a fraud operation for at least 7 years, Wes began. He identifies people with significant assets, gets close to them through his family or business connections, then manufactures situations to take those assets. He uses custody disputes, mental health accusations, and fraudulent legal documents to force his victims into settlements. Shannon was writing rapidly. How many victims? At least 3 confirmed. Probably more. I have financial records showing he's already identified 2 more targets. And you're his latest victim? He's trying to steal my engineering company and use it to commit fraud on a city infrastructure project. The new stadium. He's been bribing city officials to steer the contract to a shell company, then planning to cut corners on construction. If that stadium fails, people will die. And I'll be blamed. Shannon's eyes widened. That's a hell of a story. What proof do you have? Wes pulled out a folder. Financial records. Wire transfers showing bribes. Emails discussing the scheme. Testimony from my wife about conversations she overheard. And testimony from Glenn's wife, who's turning state's evidence. Sylvia Marsh is testifying against her husband in exchange for immunity. She's been complicit in his schemes, but she's also terrified of him. He killed his own daughter 3 years ago when she threatened to expose him. Shannon stopped writing. That's a serious accusation. Natasha Marsh died in a car accident in 2023. Single vehicle crash, brake failure. Happened 1 week after she told her mother she was going to the police about Glenn's fraud operation. Her husband, Leon Chong, is willing to testify about the suspicious circumstances. Has anyone investigated it as a potential homicide? Not yet, but with Sylvia's testimony and the pattern of behavior, they will. Shannon leaned back, studying him. Why are you doing this publicly? Why not just work through law enforcement? Because Glenn has influence in the legal system. Judges who owe him favors. Lawyers who'll slow walk investigations. I need public pressure to make sure he can't make this go away. And because you want your son back. Wes met her eyes. Yes, Glenn took my son, locked him in a room, has been poisoning him against me for months. I'll do whatever it takes to stop that. Shannon nodded slowly. I'll need to verify everything independently. Talk to witnesses, review documents. But if it all checks out, this is Pulitzer material. When can you give me the evidence? Tonight. Angelina will send you everything we're filing with the court. You'll have exclusive access. When do you want it published? Friday morning. Same day the judge is supposed to rule on custody. I want Glenn to wake up to his crimes on the front page. You know this will destroy him. That's the idea. Shannon smiled grimly. Okay, let's do it. But Tyler, be careful. Men like Glenn Marsh don't go down quietly. If he figures out what you're planning, he already knows I'm fighting back. But he thinks I'm desperate and defensive. He doesn't realize I've been building a case against him this whole time. Let's hope you're right. After the meeting, Wes drove to Christine's office. She was on the phone when he arrived, but she waved him in. Yeah, I'll have the documents to you by 5, she was saying. No, he's cooperating fully. Okay, thanks. She hung up. That was the AG's office. They're moving fast. They want Sylvia's deposition tomorrow morning. Is she ready? As ready as she'll ever be. She's terrified, but she's also relieved, I think. Like she's finally telling the truth after decades of lying. What about Mark? If Glenn figures out his wife is turning, he might use Mark to intimidate her. Already handled. AG's office has Sylvia in protective custody. They moved her to a hotel this morning. Glenn thinks she's still at the spa. He's going to notice eventually. Let him. By the time he realizes she's gone, it'll be too late. Wes's phone buzzed. Paul, we have a problem, Paul said when Wes answered. Glenn just filed an emergency motion to appoint a conservator for you. Claims you're mentally unstable and need someone to manage your affairs while the custody case proceeds. Who's the proposed conservator? 3 guesses. Himself. Got in 1. He's asking Judge Keating to grant it immediately before tomorrow's hearing. Wes cursed. Can he do that? If Keating signs off, yes. And then Glenn has legal control over Tyler Works, your bank accounts, everything. Angelina, already on it. She's filing an emergency objection. But Keating could rule any time. Wes hung up and looked at Christine. Glenn's accelerating. He knows something's wrong, or he's just being cautious. This was probably always part of his plan. Take control of your assets before the custody ruling, so you can't hide anything. Either way, we're running out of time. When does Shannon's story go live? Friday morning, 5 a.m. online, 7 a.m. print edition. And Sylvia's deposition? Tomorrow at 9 a.m. So we have about 40 hours before everything goes public. 40 hours for Glenn to figure out what we're doing and try to stop it. Christine looked at him seriously. He will try. You know that, right? Glenn doesn't just lose. He burns everything down rather than admit defeat. Then we make sure he burns alone, not taking my family with him. That night, Wes barely slept. He kept checking his phone, waiting for news, waiting for Glenn's next move. It came at 3 a.m. A call from an unknown number. Wes almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Tyler. Glenn's voice, calm and measured. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. I think we do. I know what you're planning. The reporter, the AG's office, my wife's sudden disappearance. Very clever. I'm impressed. Wes said nothing. But here's the thing, Wes. You're not going to win. Even if everything you've filed is true, and I'm not saying it is, you're forgetting one critical detail. What's that? Lindsay. Whatever immunity deal you think Sylvia has, Lindsay doesn't. She's been part of this from the beginning. She helped me document your instability. She lied to therapists and doctors. She participated in isolating Jake from you. If I go down, she goes down with me. And then Jake loses both parents. Wes gripped the phone. Lindsay was acting under duress. Can you prove that? Or are you relying on her testimony, which I'll have torn apart in cross-examination? Wes, you can't save everyone. Make your choice. You can destroy me and lose Lindsay. Or you can accept my settlement offer and keep your family. What offer? You sign over 40% of Tyler Works. I drop all charges. I agree to joint custody. Lindsay stays out of prison. Everyone walks away with something. Except you get to use my company for fraud. That's speculation. Maybe I just want a good investment. Maybe I genuinely believe you need help managing the business. Does it matter? You get Jake back. Isn't that what you want? Wes thought about Jake's face at that window. They're lying. Help Dad. No deal, he said. See you in court. He hung up before Glenn could respond. 5 minutes later, Angelina called. Glenn's lawyers just filed 50 pages of additional documents with the court. affidavits from people claiming to witness your violent behavior, medical records supposedly showing a history of mental illness, evidence that you've been harassing the Marsh family. It's all fabricated, but it's convincing. Can you counter it? Not by tomorrow morning. Wes, he's burying us in paperwork. Classic legal maneuver. Overwhelm the opposition, so the judge only has time to read his version. So what do? We trust that our evidence is stronger. That Trisha's testimony and Lindsay's files and Sylvia's deposition outweigh his lies. But I'll be honest, it's going to be close. After she hung up, Wes sat in the darkness of his apartment, thinking. Glenn was right about one thing. Lindsay was vulnerable. She'd participated in Glenn's scheme, even if she'd been coerced. A prosecutor might not see that as a sufficient defense. But Glenn was wrong about another thing. Wes wasn't choosing between his family and justice. He was fighting for both. And if Glenn thought 50 pages of lies would stop him, Glenn didn't understand who he was dealing with. Wes pulled out his laptop and started writing. Everything he knew about Glenn's operation, documented in painful detail. Times, dates, conversations, evidence. He wrote for 3 hours, until dawn light started filtering through the windows. When he finished, he had a document that was simultaneously a testimony and a declaration of war. He sent it to Angelina, to Christine, to Shannon Robinson. Then he drove to the court. Thursday's hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Wes arrived early with Angelina. The courthouse was already crowded. Apparently Glenn had invited supporters. Businessmen in expensive suits, associates from his various ventures, people who owed him favors or feared his retaliation. Lindsay arrived with Glenn and Kenneth Phillips. Mark was absent, probably off handling whatever emergency Glenn had assigned him. Lindsay wouldn't meet Wes's eyes, and he realized Glenn must have confronted her about the USB drive, about their meeting. She looked terrified. Judge Keating entered, and the hearing began. Kenneth Phillips went first, presenting Glenn's emergency motion for conservatorship. He painted Wes as unstable, violent, a danger to himself and others. He showed the court fabricated medical records, doctored emails, testimony from people Wes had never met. It was a masterclass in legal manipulation. When Angelina stood to respond, she had to fight for every word. Judge Keating kept interrupting, asking skeptical questions, clearly favoring Glenn's narrative. But then Angelina played her trump card. Your Honor, we have testimony from Dr. Mahoney's clinical supervisor that the therapy sessions with Jake Tyler were fraudulent. That Dr. Mahoney was coaching the child to make false statements about his father. That records were falsified to support Mr. Marsh's custody claim. Keating frowned. That's a serious allegation. We have sworn testimony, and we have financial records showing Mr. Marsh paid Dr. Mahoney $50,000 last month, ostensibly for consulting services, but the timing corresponds exactly with when she began seeing Jake. Kenneth Phillips jumped up. Objection. That's irrelevant. Dr. Mahoney is a respected professional. Any payments were for legitimate services. Then explain why Mr. Marsh paid her 3 times her normal rate, and why the payments came from a shell company rather than his personal account. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Keating banged his gavel. I'll review the testimony and the financial records, he said. But this doesn't change the fundamental issue. Mr. Tyler broke into the Marsh residence and assaulted Mark Marsh. That's documented fact. Because his son was locked in a room, Your Honor. Because Jake had written a note saying he was being held against his will. Any father would have done the same. That's not for you to decide. Then let's ask Jake. Let's have him testify about whether he felt safe at the Marsh residence, about whether he wanted to see his father, about what he overheard regarding Mr. Marsh's plans. Keating hesitated. The boy is 8 years old. I'm not putting him through testimony in open court. Then interview him in chambers. Let him tell you the truth. I'll consider it. But first, I want to address this conspiracy theory about Mr. Marsh. Do you have any actual evidence of criminal activity, Ms. Bernard? Or just speculation based on circumstantial financial records? Angelina smiled. We have testimony from Mr. Marsh's wife, Sylvia Marsh, who is currently giving a deposition to the Attorney General's office about Mr. Marsh's fraud operation. She's detailing schemes going back 7 years, including possible murder. The courtroom exploded. Kenneth Phillips was shouting objections. Glenn's face had gone white. Lindsay looked like she might faint. Judge Keating was banging his gavel, demanding order. "Murder," he said when the noise died down. "You're accusing Mr. Marsh of murder?" Natasha Marsh, his daughter, died in 2023 under suspicious circumstances, 1 week after she threatened to expose his fraud operation. Sylvia Marsh has testified that her husband admitted to tampering with Natasha's brakes. Glenn stood up. "This is outrageous. My daughter died in a tragic accident, and you're using it to—" "Sit down, Mr. Marsh," Keating snapped. Then, to Angelina, "Do you have proof of this testimony?" The Attorney General's office can confirm that Mrs. Marsh is cooperating with their investigation. And we have other witnesses. Leon Chong, Natasha's husband. Rick Gardner and Anthony Maxwell, previous victims of Mr. Marsh's fraud schemes. All willing to testify. Keating looked shaken. He'd clearly expected a routine custody hearing, not a criminal conspiracy case. "I'm going to adjourn this hearing until the AG's office completes its investigation," he said. "In the meantime, the current custody arrangement stands." "Your Honor," Angelina interrupted. "Jake Tyler is currently in the custody of a man under investigation for fraud and murder. Surely that changes the risk assessment." Keating paused. He looked at Glenn, at Lindsay, at Wes. "Emergency temporary custody to Mr. Tyler," he said finally, "pending the investigation. Mrs. Tyler will have supervised visitation. Mr. Marsh will have no contact with a minor child." Glenn's face contorted with rage. "You can't. I can and I have. This hearing is adjourned." Keating left the bench quickly, like he couldn't get out of the courtroom fast enough. Kenneth Phillips was already on his phone, probably calling in favors, trying to reverse the ruling. But Wes just stood there, barely able to breathe. He'd won. Temporarily, provisionally, but he'd won. Jake was coming home. In the hallway, Lindsay caught up with him. Glenn was surrounded by his lawyers and supporters, too busy trying to control the damage to notice. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For all of it. For letting him manipulate me. For not standing up to him sooner. You stood up when it mattered. I should have protected Jake. I should have protected you. You did. You gave me the evidence I needed. Without you, Glenn would have won." She looked back at her father, who was arguing with Kenneth Phillips. What's going to happen to him? Honestly, if Sylvia's testimony holds up, if the AG finds enough evidence, he's going to prison. For a long time. Lindsay nodded slowly. "Good. He deserves it. For Natasha. For Leon. For everyone he's hurt." She paused. "What about us?" Wes looked at her. The woman he'd loved, who'd been turned into a weapon against him, who was now standing in the wreckage of her family and asking about their future. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But right now, let's focus on getting Jake safe. The rest we'll figure out." She nodded and walked away. Friday morning, Wes woke up to his phone buzzing continuously. Messages, calls, notifications. He checked the time. 5:15 a.m. Shannon Robinson's story had gone live. The headline, "Local businessman Glenn Marsh accused of operating decade-long fraud scheme. Under investigation for daughter's death." Below it, a photo of Glenn at some charity event, smiling his confident smile. Wes read the article. Shannon had done her homework. Every allegation backed up with evidence. Interviews with Leon Chong, Rick Gardner, and Anthony Maxwell. Financial records showing the wire transfers and shell companies. Quotes from Sylvia's deposition. Even a statement from Trisha Pham about the fraudulent therapy sessions. It was devastating. By 6 a.m., the story was everywhere. Local news picked it up. National outlets started calling. The Attorney General's office released a statement confirming their investigation. By 7, Kenneth Phillips was on TV, claiming Glenn was the victim of a smear campaign by his disgruntled son-in-law. By 8, 3 of Glenn's business partners had publicly cut ties with him. By 9, the city announced they were suspending consideration of any bids involving Glenn Marsh or his associates pending the investigation. The stadium project was off the table. Wes got a call for Paul. "Have you seen the news?" "Yeah. We're getting calls from clients. Most of them are concerned, but willing to wait and see. A few want reassurance that Tyler Works isn't going to be involved in any of this. Tell them I'll release a statement this afternoon. Tyler Works had no knowledge of Glenn's plans and will cooperate fully with any investigation. Already drafted. You just need to sign off. By 10, Lindsay called. Dad's lost it. He's screaming at everyone. He tried to call Mom, but she's not answering. He knows she's the one who turned on him. Is he threatening her? He can't reach her, but he's threatening everyone else. Me included. Lindsay, get out of that house. Take Jake and leave. Jake's not here. The court order said you have temporary custody, remember? I dropped him at your apartment this morning. Wes cursed. He'd been so focused on the news that he hadn't checked his door. He sprinted across the apartment and found Jake sitting in the hallway, his backpack beside him, looking scared. Buddy, how long have you been here? Mom dropped me off an hour ago, but you didn't answer when I knocked, so I waited. Wes pulled him into a hug. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Come inside. He got Jake settled with breakfast and cartoons, then called Lindsay back. Where are you now? Still at Dad's house. I can't leave. He won't let me. What do you mean he won't let you? He's locked all the doors. Took my car keys. Says I'm not going anywhere until I fix this mess. Wes's blood went cold. Lindsay, that's kidnapping. Call the police. He took my phone too. I'm calling from the landline in the bathroom. He doesn't know I'm in here. I'm calling 911 right now. Stay in the bathroom. Lock the door. He called the police and reported the situation. They said they'd send units immediately. Then he called Christine. Glenn's holding Lindsay hostage. He's completely lost control. That's what I was afraid of. Men like him, when they realize they're cornered, they get dangerous. The police are on their way. Good. But Wes, be careful. Glenn knows where you live. If he gets free, if he decides to retaliate, I'll be ready. Wes hung up and went to check on Jake. His son was watching TV, but Wes could see the tension in his shoulders. Is Mom okay? Jake asked quietly. She will be. The police are helping her. Grandpa's bad, isn't he? Like really bad. Yeah, buddy. He is. I knew it. I always knew. They sat together on the couch, Wes holding his son close, and waited for news. It came an hour later. Lindsay called from a police station. They arrested him, she said, her voice shaking. When the police showed up, he tried to fight them. He actually pulled a gun on them. They had to taser him. Are you hurt? No. I'm fine. Shaken, but fine. Mark was there too. He tried to help Dad. They arrested him for assault on an officer. Jesus. It's over, Wes. It's really over. But Wes knew it wasn't. Glenn would make bail. He'd fight the charges. He'd try to turn this around somehow. Men like him always did. What Wes needed was insurance. One final move that would guarantee Glenn couldn't hurt them again. He called Angelina. I need you to do something for me. What? File for full custody. Not temporary. Full legal and physical custody. On the grounds that Lindsay was complicit in Glenn's scheme and poses a risk to Jake. Silence on the line. Wes, she's helping us. She testified against her father. I know. But if Glenn thinks Jake is his leverage, he'll keep targeting Lindsay to get to him. The only way to keep Jake completely safe is to remove him from the equation. You're going to take Lindsay's son away from her? Temporarily. Just until Glenn's in prison and the threat is neutralized. Then we can revisit custody. She's going to hate you for this. Probably. But she'll have a son who's alive and safe. That's more important. Angelina sighed. Okay, I'll file the motion. But Wes, don't lose yourself in this. Glenn tried to destroy you, but you don't have to become him to win. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm trying to protect my family. Make sure you remember the difference. After she hung up, Wes sat with Jake and explained what was going to happen. That Jake would live with him for a while. That Mom would visit, but not live with them. That Grandpa Glenn was in trouble and couldn't see them anymore. Jake took it better than Wes expected. Maybe because he'd already seen enough of Glenn's true nature. Maybe because he was just relieved to be with his father. That afternoon, Shannon Robinson called. The AG's office just announced charges. Glenn Marsh is being indicted on 15 counts. Fraud, bribery, conspiracy, extortion, and voluntary manslaughter in connection with Natasha's death. Voluntary manslaughter? Not murder. They couldn't prove premeditation. But if he's convicted on all counts, He's looking at 20 to 30 years. What about Mark? 5 counts. He's probably going to flip and testify against Glenn to reduce his sentence. And Sylvia? Full immunity, as promised. She's cooperating completely. That evening, Wes got a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. You think you've won. Glenn's voice, hoarse with rage. You think you've destroyed me. Glenn, you're out on bail. You shouldn't be calling me. I'm calling from my lawyer's office. This is a legal call. I'm offering you one last deal. No deals. You're going to take Lindsay's son away from her. File for full custody. Do you really think that's right? After everything she's been through, Lindsay was helping you destroy me. She was protecting herself. From me, yes, but also from you. You're so righteous, Wes. So sure you're the good guy. But you're willing to rip a mother away from her child just to win. To keep Jake safe. From what? From Lindsay? She's not a threat. I am. But I won't be, not once I'm in prison. So this custody play is just cruelty. Just you punishing her for choosing her father over you. Wes felt the words hit home, even though he knew Glenn was manipulating him. What do you want? Drop the custody motion. Let Lindsay be Jake's mother, and I'll accept a plea deal. I'll plead guilty to every charge, waive my right to trial, and go to prison quietly. No more drama. No more fighting. Just let it end. Why would you do that? Because she's my daughter, and despite everything, I love her. I don't want to watch you destroy her the way I destroyed everyone else. Wes was silent. Think about it, Glenn said. You can have your revenge. Watch me go to prison. Or you can have your revenge and make your wife suffer. What kind of man are you, Wes Tyler? The line went dead. Wes sat there, phone in hand, feeling the weight of Glenn's words. He told Angelina he wasn't trying to destroy anyone, that he was protecting his family. But was that true? Or was he so focused on winning, on making sure Glenn could never threaten them again, that he was willing to hurt Lindsay in the process? Jake came out of his room. Dad? Who was that? Your grandfather. What did he want? To make me question myself. Did it work? Wes looked at his son. 8 years old, brave enough to write a note asking for help, smart enough to gather evidence, resilient enough to survive everything Glenn had put him through. I don't know, Wes admitted. What do you think I should do? Jake thought about it seriously. I think Mom made mistakes, but she still loves me. And I love her. I don't want to not see her. Even though she helped Grandpa, he scared her. He scares everyone. But she tried to help you in the end, right? That should count for something. Wes pulled Jake into another hug. You're a lot smarter than I am, buddy. That night, Wes called Angelina and told her to withdraw the full custody motion. They'd go with joint custody instead, with provisions that Glenn Marsh had no access or influence. Then he called Lindsay. I'm sorry, he said. I was going to take Jake away from you. I thought it was the only way to keep him safe. But that was wrong. She was crying. Wes, I'm still angry. About all of it. But Jake needs his mother. And you earned a second chance by standing up to Glenn when it mattered. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're not back together. I don't know if we ever will be. But we're co-parenting. For Jake. I understand. And Wes. Dad called me too. He told me what he offered you. About the plea deal. Yeah. Are you going to take it? Wes thought about Glenn's words. About becoming the kind of man who destroyed people. Even people who'd wronged him. No, he said. Glenn doesn't get to play the martyr. He doesn't get to make this about protecting you. He committed real crimes against real people. He needs to face real consequences. All of them. Even if it means a long, ugly trial. Even then, Leon, Rick, Anthony, they deserve to see justice done. Not a backroom deal where Glenn admits guilt but controls the narrative. Okay, then I'll testify. At the trial. Everything I know. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I helped him. I need to own that. And I need to make sure he never hurts anyone again. The trial took place 6 months later. Glenn Marsh pleaded not guilty to all charges, and Kenneth Phillips mounted an aggressive defense. But it wasn't enough. Leon Chong testified about his wife's death and the suspicious circumstances. Sylvia described Glenn's admission about tampering with the brakes. Lindsay explained how Glenn had coerced her into participating in the scheme against Wes. Rick Gardner and Anthony Maxwell detailed how Glenn had destroyed their lives and stolen their assets. Trisha Pham testified about Dr. Mahoney's fraudulent therapy sessions. And Wes testified about the padlock on Jake's door, about Glenn's threats, about the plan to use Tyler Works for fraud. The financial records Lindsay had stolen filled in every gap. Wire transfers, shell companies, bribes to city officials. All of it documented, time-stamped, undeniable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Glenn Marsh was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Mark got 12. Dr. Mahoney lost her license and got 3 years. Kenneth Phillips was disbarred and avoided jail time by cooperating with prosecutors. Judge Keating retired quietly after an ethics investigation. The city reopened the bidding for the stadium project. Tyler Works won it fairly. 1 year later, Wes stood on the construction site, watching the stadium's foundation being poured. Paul was beside him, reviewing the latest structural calculations. "We're ahead of schedule," Paul said, "and under budget. Imagine that. Doing it right actually saves money." Wes smiled. Who knew? His phone buzzed. Lindsay, asking if Jake wanted to come over for dinner. They'd settled into a rhythm. Joint custody, weekly dinners together, slowly rebuilding trust. They weren't getting back together, probably never would. Too much had happened. But they were friends again. Partners in raising their son. Jake had nightmares sometimes. About locked doors and threatening voices. But he was in real therapy now, with a counselor who'd helped him process the trauma. He was playing baseball again. Laughing again. Being 8 again. Wes had won. Not perfectly. There were scars, complications, relationships that would never fully heal. But he'd protected his son, saved his company, brought a criminal to justice. Glenn Marsh would die in prison, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with fraud and corruption. And Wes Tyler would build stadiums that lasted for generations, structures founded on solid ground and honest work. In the end, that was the difference between them. Glenn had built his life on lies, and lies always crumbled eventually. Wes had built his on the truth, even when it was hard. And the truth, it turned out, was the strongest foundation of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.